Sir, who are you?
Well, thank you, Anthony. My name's Dave Blazer, the owner of the Trailhead, the outdoor retail business here in BV. Yes, that's who I am.
That's who you are. Now, that could have been a really existential question if you wanted to go that route.
Yeah, I was trying not to. If you guys saw the pause, I was trying to figure out really how to answer that question. Yeah, it was a loaded question.
The single tear, the emotional breakdown on stage, that's everything that we were going for, right?
Trying to hold it together.
Thank you, you're doing great so far.
Okay, good.
So how long have you lived here?
9 years.
9 years, cool. And where'd you come from before here?
My parents, actually. I was born a long time ago, and then through a process of growth and maturity, we ended up here. Now you see how this is going to go.
This is going to be fun. I was looking for more of a state that you arrived here from before. And not an emotional state, just to be as clear as I can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the quick backstory with that. Okay. So when my wife and I got married, I was living in Memphis. She was in Oxford, Mississippi. We both recognized that we missed mountains and not humidity. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted to get back to Colorado. My wife has a lot of history over in the West Cliff Valley. I have a bunch of years and a bunch of family and a bunch of history on the Front Range. And we said, let's go while we can before kids and all that. So we knew that we didn't want to be in a big metropolis like Salida. So we chose Salida.
Up to 3 stories in Salida.
Yes, I mean, it was people everywhere. So we decided that we wanted to be somewhere in Colorado, but we had narrowed it down to either Estes Park or Salida. And for what we wanted to do, how we wanted to begin our whole new chapter of life together, we ended up in Salida because it felt, this whole valley felt very authentically Colorado. And that was in 2004, so math is hard, but almost 35 or 40 years ago, we started out in Salida. But we had a really hard time leaving for a very short period, but then missing everything that this valley has. And so 9 years ago, we ended up coming back to the north end of the valley. And so here we are in BV.
Cool, welcome back.
Thank you, it's good to be back.
I'm glad you made it back.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, the only negative of moving out of those high humidity environments is the hair texture just disappears, you know.
Well, yeah, but I don't have much hair, so it really helps.
Liven it up down there.
Yeah, it does.
It's
yeah.
Your job. So we just wear winter hats here and helmets of all sorts, and that helps with the texture.
Yep.
So that's good. Doesn't smell good after about 4 or 5 days. But that's fine. So when you moved back here, you didn't move right into doing Trailhead, did you?
No, that's correct. Yeah, so as the story goes for a lot of people who find this valley, find Salida or BV, and recognize that, hey, we spent a week here or we spent a season here, and we'd love to try to make it work here. We ended up in BV, and I had a job working as an office guy for one of the rafting companies, but it really was kind of that, hey, this is a way to get back. And then from there we can figure out, once we get settled, once the dust settles, then how do we make it, how do we go, where do we go from here? But beginning to recognize that after having tried many different places, that this valley and BV specifically is home. So that was kind of the ingress for how we ended up back here. And then from there it was a multi-year project of what do we want to do, how do we want to do it, but then always for me the question was back to why? Why do we want to do it? Why do we want to be here?
Ooh, good, I love that part of it.
Yeah.
Existential again.
It's a big word.
What, big word?
Oh yeah.
I don't really know what it means, I just keep using it.
Okay, that's fair.
And so, so how many people in the room here have worked at one point for the rafting companies here? Not that many, huh? Only a few of you, okay? I expected it to be a lot higher. Only because it is an entry point. You know, the service industry,
it is.
The tourism economy, right? They're looking for bodies, and sometimes they just need to be warm, and sometimes they're really good. And sometimes
so I'm just a warm body to you? Is that what this is? I thought this was going to be more.
Can we turn off the video? Have a little refocus on why we're here today. You're more than a warm body to me, Dave.
Thanks.
It's hot. Moving. Well, this is going great.
Yeah. Can I get a towel? I need to wipe my brow.
We're fortunate to have a few people here today that I know because they're in my certified heckling program, and so they're going to contribute to tonight's dialogue. Dave has been in it, and you can tell that he's in my intermediate program because he's doing so good so far.
Thank you.
Yeah, he's meant to try to throw me off the entire evening, and so far so good. So you try to figure out the why, right? And one of the things that I think about it, and I mentioned this last night, Western Colorado University is where I am, right? And you guys live here, your university is the School of Hard Knocks, and I get that fine. But Western Colorado University is small, and so usually we have a professorial couple come in. And they're usually younger, and they're usually kind of working their way up the chain of academia. And they come in, and one of them is working at the university, full-time job as a professor, right? And I say, oh, that's great, you're getting to follow your career path. And the other one, I say, what are you doing? And he's like, well, I have a degree in psychology. I was like, cool, what are you doing? I'm going to be a carpenter, right? And nothing wrong with carpenter's trade, right? A really important part of our economies around here. But that's not what that person's why is, right? That's not what they want to be doing with their time in the valley. And when I hear that a person with an advanced psychology degree is doing carpentry, for me that's a ticking clock. That makes a ticking clock sound. And because I think, oh God. Here's the anyway, but realistically, it's a ticking clock for them because I think that if both people in that relationship really want to be fulfilled, even if they love the valley, even if they love where they are, at some point there's other things and there's always gives and takes, right? Income versus you living your career path, good place to raise kids, good place to have an actual business and to be surrounded by people who support that. So there's all these things that come into that. So how long did it take for you to find the why?
Wow, that's a great question. I think the process of finding the why is lifelong, because the more that you understand the why, the more why you have to understand. So I think that the phase that we're in right now is the why became, well, we want to be here, and for us, the community value in this town is pretty high, given it's a small town and there's great community, and it feels like Mayberry at some points, but it does have kind of that quintessential mountain, laid-back community aspect that we're drawn to. And so then the why really becomes, okay, why is that important? And then how do we continue to answer that why question of why are we here?
Yeah, and that can change over the course of a career, it can change over the course of relationships and just your own person.
Sure.
And though you may say this is Mayberry only had one cop, and I think I remember the persona of that cop. And you guys have a lot of police here. I drove by all of them today going a little bit too fast over the speed limit, and I just kind of kept going. I just kept yelling, Wendell Pryor said it's okay. Yeah. Sorry, Wendell, if they mailed the tickets to you, if you could just pay those out of some unrestricted fund you had. So what was the why that led you to Trailhead?
That's a good question. So at the time, the main why was income.
It's a good why.
Yeah, it's an important why. Once we had figured out that we want to maintain a life and a lifestyle here, then it became, okay, so it's a small town. Either there's a fit with an existing something in this small town, or you have to work to understand and to create your own fit in the small town. And so as the sojourn goes with anyone who wants to understand how they fit in, what they can do, why they can do it, what they're good at, or how to increase their abilities and how they can do things, then it becomes, what experience did I have that I can draw on that either I can find some small niche in this town or some way that there's something that isn't being done here, or I could help out in some capacity. And so given everything that's already here at the time, this was 2013, 2012, it really was kind of a month-long process of asking questions, walking around town, identifying things that I could do that I wanted to do, and then seeing where there was a fit with what could actually be worthwhile in town that could generate some income.
And so it turned out to be Trailhead.
It was the Trailhead.
Okay. And so did you work there initially and then take over as business owner?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hang on one second. For those of you watching at home, maybe don't take that approach in all situations, but tell us more about how that works.
So it was a very interesting conversation. So one day I finally, after months of trying to parse out what I wanted to do, what I thought I was good at, what I knew that I was really not good at, what I thought that maybe I could do in BV, I had a very casual relationship with Keith and Evelyn Baker, who are the previous owners of the Trailhead. And so one day I had just gotten to my wit's end over at the roastery, like drinking coffee and making spreadsheets and making plans and ideas. And then I said, fine. So I just walked over and I had a conversation with Keith and said, hey, if you guys are ever interested in selling, let me know. And so he looked at me kind of quizzically and he said, okay. And that was about the end of the conversation. I was like, well, that worked out well. And so then sometime later, I get a call back from Keith and he's like, okay, let's talk more. And so then we began the conversation to see if there really was a good fit. And it was almost like a dating relationship. You know, he wanted to make sure that the company that they had invested almost a decade in, that they were going to get something that made sense to continue on the company. And it was a good opportunity for me too to begin to ask questions, you know, to see if it was a good fit for what I could do. And really in a town like this, it's a business, but it's also, am I capable? Am I in a good place that I can carry on the legacy of what had begun in the early 70s? So then after a period of time, Keith and I and Evelyn, we were able to hammer something together, and here I am. Ta-da! Yeah.
I turned my mic off. Yeah. So the culmination of your life led to you landing here with me right now.
I know, isn't that amazing?
I know, that's got to be disappointing for you.
Can I drop the mic?
Like dropping it now.
Yeah, okay.
So you didn't have this specific experience in outdoor retail, right?
Yeah, actually I did.
You did, okay, tell us about that.
Okay. Let's see, so in college, many years ago when the word abacus was popular, I had worked a lot of different retail, and then after college, more retail, and then in Salida, bringing it all back around. When we first moved to Salida, I had worked for the outdoor retail store called Headwaters, which is no longer around, but is where the boathouse currently is. So I'd worked there for a couple years, so based on both professional history and passions in the outdoor industry, it was an easy fit to see if there was a way that I could parlay that into an actual job.
Okay, so that was when you lived here before, and then you left.
Well done. Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So some experience there, understanding kind of the culture of the community and understanding what things look like here on the ground, and things have changed quite a bit in Colorado since that time, right?
I mean, it wasn't that long ago.
Well,
what are you saying?
You said abacus, not me. I mean,
well, okay, that's fair. Yeah.
You gave me paper today to write my notes down, and this is papyrus, so it's your paper, right? But you left, and what other experience did you gain before coming back here that's been helpful in this transition?
Let's see. So, over probably the last, 20 years, it's been a combination of working for a Fortune 500 company, having great views from an office, having very small views from a cubicle, to getting to work with a family-owned small business, all the way through kicking off a couple things of my own that were immeasurably unsuccessful. Actually, you can't measure it. They were really, really bad.
Measurably.
Yeah, they were measurably unsuccessful. So I feel like once I got to the point of recognizing that, hey, here's a decades-long path that got me to a place where I feel like I have enough that I could hopefully keep the chainsaws juggling. It was worthwhile. I feel like I totally lost the question you were asking.
No, I think you're doing fine. I mean, we were talking about you worked in outdoor retail, you left.
Yeah.
So what do you take with you that when you come back, you're like, oh, I have this experience with it now, and what have I gained between now and then to allow me to be hopefully a successful business owner? You know, what are you taking with you from your past experience?
Yeah. So a lot of bravado. Yeah. Walking into it thinking like, oh yeah, I can do that. It's retail. It's not rocket science. It's so easy. But you know, a lot of it really is. As I begin to think about, okay, so if you break down retail, it's a small business. It's you can make it as complex or as not complex as you want, like most things. But having had some financial and some big business and some understanding of how a family-run business works, it was helpful so that then I could see, okay, if I step into this, then you end up having a hat rack full of hats, and most days you wear nearly all of them. And so coming back into it, I don't know that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that I would have had the experience to be able to say like, oh, I think I can understand most parts of this, or maybe even be proficient at some of them. And I think that's an important part, at least for me, is I'm really experiential. So in college, I'm not sure that I remember even what college I went to, let alone any of the subjects I studied in college, which a little bit of an overstatement, so hush. But for me, it's really about the practical side of what I've learned theoretically. Being able to apply that in reality is super helpful. And for me especially, I can think about things till the cows come home, but until I can actually have some context for whatever it is that I'm thinking about, it's really hard for me to ascertain whether or not it's viable. And so timing is everything, and being able to evaluate how important timing is to when you think you're ready. For me, it played into a lot of thinking back on the previous 20 years of different facets of work life and work experience, and what's important and what's not, and what stuck with me. So,
that's good. And, you know, so which degree in?
Business and marketing.
Okay, so you remember that. That's good.
Barely.
Barely. That's
Yeah.
you know, so you have some of that academic experience, right? And then you have some life experience that goes into that. And of course, like, I would say the same thing with owning a business, the same thing with parenting. Like, are you ever completely ready to be a parent?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, okay.
It says the people that aren't parents.
Right, yeah. And those are the people without, like, the dark bags under their eyes and the fringe
Yes.
hair, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so at some point you have to dive in, but you at least you had some context for the practicality piece, right? Having worked in outdoor retail, and then the other side of the business acumen, and being able to say, oh, it's going to work like this. But I heard a lot of intuition there as well, of being like, I've checked enough boxes on this, and for me to really know, I just got to do it, right? Potentially dangerous, right? You know,
Very.
Yeah. And you know, the other part is like, how do you get that 10 to 15 years of experience? And even if you're living in Chaffee County your entire life, how do you get that real large world experience? You don't, right? I mean, your chances of doing that here are pretty limited. So watch this shameless plug, folks. It's coming and it's going to be really smooth. How can we find resources in the Valley that might help us with those things? I just don't even know where to look. Oh, there's a logo right there, right? And I think that that's part of why we're here today, is to say, you know, you have a story, and your story is kind of learning on your own and doing things, this experiential piece that you brought forward. But how do we create a system, a place, a culture in the community that supports small business? One, supports them in the sense that, like, we think of going into brick and mortars before we think about going online, right? At least giving.
Yes, do that all the time.
Right?
Yeah.
All the time, please. Buy things you don't need, it's fine.
Yes.
Because credit cards, don't even worry about those eventually. If there's going to be a financial collapse, we won't have to pay that stuff off. I saw that in a really good documentary called Fight Club.
It's not real money. Money isn't real. It's not a thing.
That's why I print mine at home. But that's part of what this is that the Small Business Development Center, which is a state-run organization, local contacts, and that's Jamie, and Chaffey County has one goal on the ground, right? We try to connect you with resources, and the resources can be like understanding how to put your business plan together. They're going to make you write your own business plan because it's really good for you to do that and understand all the pieces in it. But they're also there to try to help you connect with investors, help you connect with lenders, help you connect with somebody that can give you marketing experience, and that's part of what the suite of the SBDC does. Is that you get to a point where you're like, I understand the part of running a rafting operation now, but I am not a marketer. What do I do about that? And they can point you towards those resources. So it's about creating that kind of ecosystem so that the 10 to 15 years of experience that you went and got that's been helpful now could be replicated in some other way. That institutional knowledge can come into your business.
And a lot quicker.
And a lot quicker, sure. Ideally, like that fast. And if you're going to fail, intuition, I think it's a great thing. I pay attention to it all the time. But you also need to back that out with pragmatism, right? And also vetting my ideas with other people, typically psychologists. And notice I said psychologists plural. But having access to those resources that can kind of help you say, this idea has legs, but let's put some numbers to this and see where it can really go. And then let's fail on paper before we fail in a brick and mortar, right? And so that you can tweak and make pivots. And to that point, you made a pivot, and one of it was the big move of making the business move. And so tell us about why you did that.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Good pivot, by the way.
Thank you.
So when we first started taking a look at it, when Keith and I first started having conversations about if we would be the next caretakers, really, of the business, I had already, being experiential, I had already recognized that I really enjoy the small town of BV and had already experienced the small town of Salida, and being very comfortable and really enjoying the downtown kind of lifestyle life epicenter of what Salida had become. I also wanted that for BV, and in the early 2000 teens, the downtown of BV was really the Roastery, CKS, and Asian Palette, and maybe a few other small things. But downtown was beginning to wake back up. But for me, there was always a huge desire to want to draw people into the epicenter of what I view as the soul of the town, more or less. And so pretty quickly, we started looking around, because I wasn't sure that if the business had stayed in the same building, same location, we would have continued on what the Trailhead had been for almost the previous 30 years, which isn't bad. But I think pulling on part of my marketing and branding background, like it was time for a little bit of a refresh. And so I don't do things small, and so I thought, well, refresh, let's just find a new building. That sounds great and really easy. So
just as cheap as redoing your logo.
Oh yeah, yes. It was so cheap. It was anyway, but part of it was as I had begun to now wear a hat of hey, this is a business that is a part of the community of BV. How can I continue to grow my portion of my value to giving back to the community, for lack of a better cliche? And so it really became, hey, is there something downtown that would make a good fit for where we can continue to take the company for the next 10, 15, 20 years? So, after lots of days of walking up and down the street, and you kind of touched on this earlier. So part of what the SBDC does really well, and the EDC does really well, and this community that does really well, is connection. And for me, that connection was talking to people. And for me, I just went out and had conversations and asked questions, and eventually met the people that own the building that the Trailhead is located in now. And after a lot of conversations, then it really turned into this could be really cool. And so here we are. But that's the beauty of one facet of what I love about BV is that the community is really embracing and very warm and receptive. And so it makes it easier to want to practice the art of networking and communicating. And then all of a sudden you have people who you had no idea that could impact what you're doing, why you're doing, how you're doing it, as well as that can help test, break, or proof positive what you want to do.
Well said. Do you agree? Yeah. I agree.
Good. I'm glad you guys agree. I have a very emotional state, so I cry easily. So thank you for agreeing with me.
Just when I thought I had control of the conversation, he proves that he's in control. But I think that's a really important point, right? Is that again, entrepreneurship ecosystem is a lot of things, right? Having ready-made, having funding available, having ideas on where funding could come from. And helping people along those paths and getting businesses ready and helping you get a business plan that a bank will actually look at or an investor will look at, right? But it's also the soft piece of people having your back, right? Like people being interested in seeing these sort of things happen in their community and then just making those quick connections that happen, that maybe would have never happened. And I have to applaud you. I mean, I think your building looks absolutely fantastic. I imagine you all would agree on that, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It looks great. You kept the historic look. It's like it's an ode to honoring kind of what the past was down here, because the store was the old Colorado what? It was
the State Highway Department, and then a few things before that. But yeah, it's got a lot of history. It's a fun old building.
Yeah, it looks fantastic, but it looks current, but it's honoring the past at the same time. So it looks really great in that sense. And I think you're really right, is that we've seen this sort of revitalization of downtowns and people moving away from the big box areas and the strip malls and all those things. And I can tell you that I despise strip malls. I really try not to go into them, right? I love standalones, I love brick and mortar, I love that feel. And that's, I think, what's really compelling for so many people about rural Colorado, and is that we have these amazing, cool little, cute little downtowns. I mean, just think of all of them. So I was in Salida last night on F Street, hanging out down there, right by the Arkansas River. Like, how many people get that experience, right? Or in Silverton in the mountains. What you do?
I mean, it's right here too.
It was more of a rhetorical question.
Sorry.
I had a moment go on there. You dropped a hand grenade on that.
I ruined it.
But think about I get to work all over the Western Slope and in rural Colorado, San Luis Valley, all those places, and there is something that can't be captured in other places that they're trying to. Like I would say that the town of Eagle is trying to create their own South Main Street, and right now it feels like it stands too far alone, right? So this is an interesting context that we're here at the Surf Hotel down at South Main Street, and that the historic East Main Street exists, and I think they're complementary to each other, and I want to come back to that. But the important part here for me is these downtowns are gathering places, right? Really good for the human to be in contact with other people. Our brains like that. We like to have our tribes. We like to have our towns, our places that we can call home, feeling like we're part of something bigger than ourselves or something more than ourselves, right? Something that we can call that's really a place. And then I think what's amazing about what attracts people to these areas, including you and probably a lot of people in the room, is that we can step away from this place, and then we are in wild spaces, right? Wild spaces like northern places. Like I go down to the Front Range quite a bit and go to ride my bike down there, and first of all, they don't know what a switchback is at all in the Front Range. It's just like, oh, you want to go to the top? Here you go. So when I'm at the top, suffering from pulmonary edema, I really enjoy thinking about the fact that we have beautifully designed things here, and open spaces that are hopefully protected in a lot of ways, so that we don't lose those viewscapes and active ranches. So anyway, full circle, let's come back to, you move it downtown, and you don't just move the business downtown, but you move the business downtown, and then there's an eatery. So tell us about why that happened.
Yeah, so it's a big space. Like the building it's really cool. It's got tons of history. It's got neat bones, but it's enormous. And so for the Trailhead at the time, we had looked at years of data and had begun to forecast out and extrapolate out, okay, this is where it's been, this is where it is now, And even trying to account for the variable of new location, it was really hard to justify that we were going to take up that full space. And so then it began, for me, a fun conundrum of, okay, so if we're going to be in this space, then what else is here? And at the time, there's an area in Denver called the River North or Rhino area. There's this building that is this enormous old warehouse called the Source. And I went up just on an exploratory trip just so that I could kind of touch and feel some different places and kind of begin picking out ideas and things that I could replicate or that resonated well, to help kind of put some structure around what I was ethereally trying to do with, this new space. And so the Source is this huge old warehouse, and inside you've got a central aisle, and then all around the perimeter are there are like 3 different restaurants, a brewery, a little kind of like cost plus world market where you can find all kinds of different foods and wines. And anyway, so you have this really cool focal point gathering place where you're combining a lot of different retail, but retail experiences together. And so that stuck with me. At least the idea that I took away was, here's a building that now is doing well more than just one thing. And for me, recognizing that we live in a small town, how can we really engage well and capitalize on as much as possible so that we can do as much as possible in a small space, given that we don't have the same volume of traffic that Cherry Creek does in Denver. So then it became okay, so if we're going to put something else in that building, what else makes sense? And so what I think about a lot is replication. How can you get people in to do something again and again and again? And in our town, whether you're a local or a visitor to BV, a lot of that replication happens with food and or beer. Or
stores have this kind of meal.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Thank you. So then it was, okay, so what about a restaurant? Restaurant would be a great way to also keep people downtown, because what I'm trying to do is use the business as a catalyst for other things. And so I had talked with one of the guys who was a part of the Eddie Line restaurant, and he had just began thinking about, okay, I'm going to break away and do my own thing. And I was like, let's do it together. I can do a restaurant. I can barely feed myself. So if I tried to operate a restaurant, it would fail miserably. But Ryan McFadden, Simple Eatery, is really good at what he does with restaurants. And so it was a great way to say, like, let's combine this experience into a broader way to keep people downtown, keep people interested in what's happening in BV. And then intrinsically, people come in the wintertime for soup and they buy hand warmers or they just look around. But it creates more opportunity both for the Trailhead and for Simple Eatery, because we've created a valuable shared experience that by choosing partners that work well together, it's an experience that people want to replicate because they enjoy the experience, whether they're local or this has now become part of their experience, that when they think about Simple Eatery or the Trailhead, they're thinking really about, hey, our time in BV was great. And I think that's really what we aim to accomplish most notably.
Well said. That's an attraction tool for bringing people in, right? And getting them to see that downtown can be successful. And I want to talk about catalysts in a second. But think about what you can do if you give people 6 reasons to go downtown, right? And I think we've all been to those downtowns in economies like this that have a high tourism, component to it, where the whole downtown turns into something that people don't go to. right? That local people don't go to because it's not for them. It's like the trinket shop and this shop and even in this sort of thing, and they don't go there anymore. And then somewhere over time, the post office moved out, and somewhere over time, the gas station moved out, and all the sort of things leave. And now it's really they become destinations in a bad way versus destinations in a good way, if that makes sense. So I like seeing that. And then encouraging density around the downtown so that it's a walkable space. And the towns that have a high degree of walkability and bikeability also measure out as the happiest places on the planet. So places where you can get into nature really easily, which I think you all can do here. And you can, instead of living in a subdivision that's 30 minutes out of town, you don't have to commute to work, you can be downtown, you can walk. Those things are all really good for us. And I think we're kind of coming full circle on understanding that. And that's why a lot of these planned communities seem to have some traction, is that, well, at least there's a community within a community, even if we're 20 miles away from the population center because of the traffic. So talk about the catalyst part of it. What are you hoping, in addition to a retail and an eatery, that your business serves us?
That's a great question. I feel like that's the question that it really varies from day to day, from year to year. Originally, we thought that if we combine a retail experience and a restaurant into one space, then ideally it would help keep people downtown more. And then catalyzing both people's visitation in the downtown corridor, which means that now there are new opportunities for other businesses to come into downtown, occupy old buildings, or maybe rehabbing an old building, or building something new, like the roastery. Let's see, this has been a handful of years ago now, but had expanded significantly. And so now there's a bustling downtown area. And so that's a great catalyst if you think about the purpose really is to give people a broader experience of this is why we want people to experience BV. And you'll get answers to this question that range the spectrum of my grandparents homesteaded here, and we are an important part of the pioneering of this valley, all the way through. We moved here 2 months ago because we saw the value and the energy of what's going on in this community as a whole. But by and large, the more that we can invite people into our community, whether it's through eating and staring west and seeing the mountains, or if it's because they buy a t-shirt at one of the few retail places on Main Street now, those people go home, but they still remember BV. And I love that. I love that we get to share what we have in this community, both with people that live here, so that we don't hopefully take it for granted all the time, but so that we can also say, hey, you guys are a part of what makes this valley special, and you got to experience it, whether you live in Kansas or Denver or California.
And we're also sometimes happy when they go home, right? Yeah. So usually by like mid-September, we're like, all right, we're done. We need it right now. Yeah. And then mid-September, it's not flattened out where I live, and so it just kind of keeps going. I hope it hasn't flattened out.
No, thank you though.
Yeah. I'm worried about you, bro.
Oh, thanks, yeah.
We can cry together later.
Okay.
I think that's a great thing, and that they come down and they get to be part of something, and then hopefully we find energy in the fact that, we have the benefit of getting to live in these awesome places, and they want to live here, and we can give them a way to maybe think about that. And if they want to live here, and they do something like everybody's, trying to attract these Blown Eagles and all these folks that are remote workers that they're location neutral, right? They can say, I can live wherever I want to live, and so where am I choosing? And so how do you make yourself a place that can, you choose that? But I also think that you said something really nice about, I don't think we want these places to become homogenous either, right? And I love the fact that when we drive through these towns and these counties, that you're behind the dually with a flatbed on it, and there's a couple cattle dogs hanging out on the top running around, and you're like, this dog's have incredible balance. Or they're just willing to let a few of them not make it, I don't know, either way. But these dogs are kicking around, and right behind that is the SUV, and right behind that is a Subaru, and right behind that is the one with coming from down here with kayaks on the top of it. And that's that diversity and that vibrancy is something that we need to celebrate. And I have to tell you that I found out about this event that I didn't know existed before, but BV Strong, your event that you do every year. that should be done in every town, in every state across the world. I mean, across the universe. Let's go bigger, existential.
Wow.
You know, I mean, it's something that we should be doing, right? Because the idea is hopefully not sitting at a table full of, you know, with insular approach of like who you sit with, but, you know, just getting to talk to the people around you and understanding what that's like. And I think that that's we had lost that from, I think, my grandparents' generation when we became subdivisions, and as we become really mobile in the fact that, like, you know, I grew up in New Jersey, hard to believe the name Anthony Poponi, I know. But I've lived in a lot of different places, and my parents really have not done that. My grandparents didn't do that. My grandparents lived 15 miles in New Jersey, which is 6 hours away. But they lived 15 miles from where they grew up, you know, and that's really changing, and that changes the fabric of the community when we lose that. So I think that's why downtowns are really important, and the fact that we're trying to bring people back to these spaces together and get them from the, you know, out in the hills literally to, you know, back into town. So thanks for being a catalyst.
Yeah, definitely. And then to also segue, another quick thought too, when things started to stabilize a little bit more with the business, then it allowed me to think about, wait, so why is this still important? And so then it really allowed for a lot more of the why questions to come about. And so then, okay, so why do I want the business to catalyze other things? And then, okay, so what does that even mean? And so then it became a lot of, okay, so for me, I would love to import more people into this town to lessen the town's dependence on a very summer seasonal service-based economy. And so when I think about that, I think about, okay, wait, if my business is that I have all of these companies and all these brands that I work with and that I sell, I now have this super highway to a lot of diversity of businesses or ideas that maybe one of those would want to move their business here. And so then you can, for me anyway, I think about how I can use the Trailhead to catalyze other ways that don't necessarily even involve or touch the Trailhead. We get people that come in all the time that love the community and love the mountains and ask about, where can I live? Like, I want to move here. I want to do something here. And so then we begin to also have conversations with people about, we can facilitate, you know, if you want to move here, that's awesome. Here's what we can share with you. Here's where you can do your thing. Here's what you could do. And then that adds to that eclecticity, I'm sure that's a word, of being able to say, you now have a ton of different vehicles rolling down the road. You've got SUVs, you've got the flatbeds with the dogs, hopefully 2 and not 4 that they drop somewhere. But then all of a sudden, now you have people from a different country, you know, or something that grows what we are in BV that's both still tight-knit, but now a little bit more expansive. And I think that's a neat part too about, it's really easy to get stuck in the day-to-day of running a really, really small business. But then to know that there's still a whole universe of ways that you can utilize what you do at the business for things outside of the business that drive reward way more than, you used a word earlier at the start of the conversation. It started with a P.
Psychologist.
No, that starts with an S. Profit. No, profit. You talked about profit.
I've heard about that.
I'm not sure what that, tequila, yes. I'm not sure what this profit word is that you speak of, but then you begin to think about, as your venture, how do you define profit? You know, what's important? Is profit valued in monetary dollars, or is profit valued in, you know, your connections and being a resource to the town or the greater purpose of whatever it is you're doing? But I think it's fun because then it lessens the tension between what you have to do to keep the lights on and how you can utilize resources in a way that keeps the lights on, but lessens or helps you keep in check the why behind what you're doing. And how to make it still successful in ways that are more broad than I have to generate a 37% margin every year or else I can't do this. Those kinds of questions.
And it's a reasonable question, right? And there's a lot of layers to that. I think the other word that I use that ties in here is flourishing, right? You know, when that if you're surviving, right? And it's like Maslow's hierarchy, but for business, right? So if you all probably know this, but we're in the base level and we're just trying to survive, right? And when we are doing that, we behave in different ways as individuals and as businesses. And then when you get to the point where you are, let's call it thriving or at least profitable, right? And you don't have to think about the electric bill or paying or switching your dogs over to the really cheap dog food. If you're right, you have 4 and I went to 2, it's a different equation. But anyway, but you know, that sort of thing of like, now what else can I be doing, right? And I don't think our brains work that way until we get into the space of moving up a hierarchy level, right? And then, and I'm sure like the given day as a business owner goes from, I'm living out my dream and my why to, oh my God, what am I doing? You know, and you bounce around between all these hierarchies, and I think it's normal, right? And so, but that's the point. So how do we create a situation where you can survive and thrive? And like, how do we make sure that, and I think community is a part of that, right? Mm-hmm. And you're even doing it for yourself when you can get to that point, because I think it creates a cyclical nature of, I'm invested in using my space for the good of the community because I can now, right? And because you're doing that, people want to think about you first, right? And then you've created that sort of emotional connection back to your business that's valuable. Especially when you were talking about being sort of a de facto visitor center bureau or the VCB, of like being willing to do that, you know, and being willing to take that time versus just being like, they're 4 blocks down, it's the red building, you know, go to that place, you know, and thinking about what that, it's not a transaction, you know, it's a relationship, and so just thinking about what that means, and that's hard to do when you're like switching the hat literally from running the cash register to cleaning up on aisle 5, and you know, thinking about also trying to have a conversation with someone that's just like, I love this place, and you're like, I need a vacation. You know, I need to go where you live because I got to get out of here. You know? And that's a different conversation. But thank you for recognizing and kind of the why, like the continual why of where you get to go when things go well.
You're welcome.
Thank you again.
You're welcome.
I don't know what to say about that. So, cyclical nature. Now we're stuck in a loop. And so let's talk. You know, you're on East Main Street, and you know, I love the things that I've seen down there. And I've had a chance to go down to the Lariat, the Court, and his wife on. What's his name?
Robbie,
thank you. Wonderful people. They come over to our valley and listen to music in our venue over there. I'm not giving a plug for them because I'm not sponsored by them. And but we've come over and listened to live music here and had a great time. The food there was fun. And we did Holden and Wolford and the High Beams. You guys know those guys? If they ever come back here, go. But don't plan on going home till 1 because it was a lot of fun. But that's a great thing because the Lariat used to not be that version of the Lariat, right? It used to be a different version of the Lariat. Your store used to be a different version. And so now we're seeing these things happen. Boom, 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 boom. And that's been happening. I don't even know when. Coffee, you went into your new building in 2015?
Correct.
Roasters was already there.
Yes.
Okay. Lariat was still the old Lariat, I think.
Let's see. 15? Yes. Yep. Uh-huh.
Right around that time.
But barely. They might have started
tweaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. Coming in. And then so South Main happens, and you know, part of the conversation for South Main. We're not far from the amphitheater. It's right here. We're down here for shows for that. That's super fun. We're right down by the river. And obvious contrast between Old Main Street and New Main Street. And when we talked with Eddieline, with Brian England, they had opened their second business down here right in the middle of a downturn, 2009, 2010. If anyone remembers that, I was selling my blood. And they did it. We talked about that story, and he was like, we were sticking it out. We kind of knew this was going to happen, and we wanted to be part of what was going on down here, so we did it. So now I think we're in a different spot. This is 2019 for those of you keeping up at home. And so what's the relationship for your business like between South Main and East Main?
I mean, it's very symbiotic. I would argue in my own little head, without South Main and what South Main has brought to BV would be a very different place. I think that South Main has captured a demographic of people that that want to be in BV that maybe wouldn't have come if South Main hadn't been here. And so then you have, as far as a small business goes, you have a whole different level of risk, when you've got a way to evaluate vision and appetite for risk, and then time frame, So if I think about what Jed and Kinley did in like 2004 and 2005, and then at the time Jed's sister Katie, they saw a huge vision for literally the nothing that was down here. And they were in it, they were playing the long game, which in the short version of the long game was probably painful. Like, it would have made me lose my mind, but I can't do what they do. But so then fast forward to 2019, now you have a thriving community, South Main, and a very supportive, very coexisting community west and south of South Main. So it's really fun that you've got neat ways to see the impact of what one person or one group's vision, tenacity, hard work, sweat, blood, tears, and how that impacts everything around it. Like, so it's, when you think about an orbit and you're in orbit, like the other things that are satellites within that orbit, like we're part of that. Like, we get people from South Main all the time in the Trailhead, and now we recommend people down to Blackborough bikes, and it's like I'll come down to the Midland stop down here because it's a fun place to go, and it's fun because it has a very different feel than other parts of BV, which I love. Like, it's a small town, and it's easy for it to feel like a bubble. And so for me, it's inspirational for me to come and just hang out in the lobby here and work on my computer or think about things, because it helps kind of reflow whatever it is, whichever hat I'm wearing.
Yeah, that's great. So it's a complement to other things in its own unique way, right? Because it's a really different vibe down here from there, but it seems like the community's really embracing it too.
Yeah, there's a way better way to say it than I did, and a lot fewer words too.
You get paid by the word, right?
Oh, really? Sweet. Oh, that's great. Thanks, Wendell.
Because it is off season, so you could use a little of a bump in the revenue. But you've created more of a community down here now, and it's what you spoke to earlier of that. How do you take a seasonal economy and recognize that we're still going to have seasonal economies here in Colorado with skiing and the awesome summers that we have? But then how do you make sure that, maybe not October, November, early part of December, and then when we start talking about April and May, like when everybody here probably goes to Moab, like I do, we're looking for those warmer climates, but the mortgage still comes in, right, and the payroll still due. And so how do we do that? And so how do we create an economy where those people are here, and so that there's a break point in there. And I'm sure somebody has analyzed this on like what that small town, and I'm sure franchises have done that. In fact, I know they have. I've seen a number of 10,000 thrown out there as a number that's necessary for a franchise in one industry to survive. So that would be interesting. So that's cool. So let's talk one final thing about ecosystem. We talked about a few different ways before. We talked about, you said you had a relationship with connections with the SBDC, and we'll shout out to Wendell, nice job on that, $100 prize. And then talk about, you said you have a really strong relationship, not necessarily looking backwards, but looking forward with High Country Bank. Yeah, and so what was that conversation like, and where are they serving you now? Having
a relationship with the local bank is good. It's important to make sure that you can stay or you can keep your business vital, or that there's enough vitality in what you do, whatever that means for you. But for us, connecting with High Country Bank was good because they've been a local partner both personally and commercially for a long time for what we've done. And because they're a local bank, they understand the dynamics, the challenges, the adaptability or the adaptive nature of what it means to need financial resources in a town like this. So initially for me, it was very different working with a bank saying, I need money. You guys have a lot of money, right? Can I have some of the money? But
how'd that go?
It went okay. There were a lot of strange looks, and
did they give you candy and then just pat you on the head and push you out the door?
No. But there were some. That's nice. But then once you recognize that it's not necessarily a bad thing to have a partner and a relationship with a bank, then we began to just have conversations, and I love the what if conversations. 9 out of 10 of them don't go anywhere, but being able to invite the key components of what you do and what your enterprise is, inviting those components into those conversations is really valuable. And so for me, the relationship began to transcend just that, like, I'm walking in with a ski mask, I want money. That didn't go very well the first couple times.
60 days minimum.
Yeah. So then it began, okay, so this is what I think I want to do. I've begun to quantify it, and then really the bank, as a partner, as a relationship, now can offer a way to test and evaluate whether or not it makes sense. Because if you can sell it well, for lack of a better term, then it's a lot easier to get others involved if you need to get others involved. And then it's also good practice too, for you to be able to communicate what it is you're doing and why, outside of the 4 walls that you've constructed. Whether those are real 4 walls or not, that's a little bit of a Matrix conversation. If anybody's seen the Matrix.
Saying your building is a false front? I got lost there.
Yeah, I can't say that, or maybe I am saying that.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That was like the Matrix.
Yeah.
You're going to tell me in a second here, like, these walls are actually not real made of stuff, right?
Well, this really isn't a wall. Figure that one out. But it's supportive like a wall, because the SBDC is supportive of what you're doing for your local business in this valley.
Oh my God.
Sorry. Small plug.
This is when I lose my job as a moderator and I take it over. He's going to run the BCB and then he's going to take over these series. Well done, sir.
Thank you.
You owe Wendell 200. Actually, now he owes you 100, so it's a net zero on this one. Well done.
That's in writing, video writing, but it's still writing of some sort. But in reality, here's a great example of we had gotten to a point about 1.5 years ago of, okay, we've created enough systems and processes in our business to understand and quantify what we want to do, how we want to do it, and how to continue to replicate that so that we can now see and look back at years of history, but now we can apply all the analytics that we have so that we can forecast well, which is really important to me, so that we don't continue to make emotional decisions on, yeah, that purple polka dotted parka would be great. I think we can sell tons of them. And then we don't sell any of them because we don't really have data to back up whether or not it makes sense.
And then as an owner, you have to wear one of those until it runs out.
Yeah.
You're like, well, I can't throw this away, so I'll just wear this around town.
It's true. And I can barely say the alliterative 3 Ps in a row, purple polka dotted parka. Yeah.
That just made my eyes cross. Carry on in the conversation.
Okay, thank you. And so we got to the point of saying, we could open up a new location. We have everything dialed in that we need to do, that we want to do, that makes sense. Everything that we can, mostly, is a system or a process, which means that we can fully quantify and evaluate what we're doing. And so then the conversation turned from what if with the bank to why not? And so we just opened up our 2nd location just last week.
Hey.
And thank you. But it was a great exercise for me because I had to recognize that I couldn't do it on my own. And having a bank as a vital partner is great because then you have access to money that you don't have to put a ski mask on anymore to go get. So And what was great too is it forced me to go back years and actually put pen to paper to make sure that if I'm going to present this to the bank because I want them to be a partner in this, then they're going to ask me tons of questions whether or not it's viable and how is it viable and how soon and how's it all going to work. So at that point, like I had to go back and dig off some old things and brush off cobwebs so that I could say, hey, if you guys are going to be involved, then I've got to be able to be diligent enough to convey and communicate why we want to do this, why this is important, and how we think it's going to work. And I really don't want to wear ski masks anymore.
For the record, the Central Mountain Small Business Development Center, that's their new name, and the Chaffey County EDC does not suggest a fundraising strategy for your business involves ski masks and bank robbery, even though it was highly successful and lucrative in my second favorite documentary, Point Break. There we are. So that's that was your what's next, and that's really fantastic.
Yes.
So to get to that point of like being able to dream about a second facility and doing this again. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Where's it at?
It's in Winter Park, Colorado. Thank you.
Which is not supported by the Central Small Business Freedom. And that's great. But you were able to identify a good market that kind of fit the model that you wanted to be doing and all those sort of things. And that's great.
Exactly.
Cool. That's great. Well, thanks. So we're going to wrap up. I really appreciate your time. Can we give him a big round of applause? I appreciate you all being here. So look for the video on this, share it with your friends, and let them all know. And keep supporting small business in Chaffey County. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Anthony.